Godongwana calls for a rethink on BEE impact, rejects calls to scrap policy. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana has challenged critics of black economic empowerment, calling for a more evidence-based discussion on the policy's real-world impact rather than ideological attacks or calls for its removal. Addressing Parliament during a briefing on the 2026 national budget, Godongwana stressed that black economic empowerment, commonly referred to as BEE, is not merely a policy choice but a constitutional requirement aimed at addressing the structural inequalities inherited from apartheid. According to the finance minister, the debate should shift away from whether BEE should exist and instead focus on whether aspects of its implementation may have produced unintended consequences. Godongwana emphasized that any discussion on reform must begin with the recognition that economic transformation is embedded in South Africa's constitutional framework. You cannot simply dismiss black economic empowerment, Godongwana said. The Constitution requires it. The real question is whether there are unintended consequences that need to be addressed. Opposition pushback from the Democratic Alliance. The renewed debates were sparked by Democratic Alliance Member of Parliament Andrew Bateman, who intensified his party's long-standing opposition to BEE during a joint sitting of Parliament's Finance and Appropriations Committees. Bateman argued that BEE has discouraged investment, constrained economic growth, and contributed to South Africa's persistently high unemployment rate. He claimed that while the policy was intended to broaden economic participation, it has instead benefited a relatively small group while failing to improve opportunities for the majority of South Africans. He concluded that in his view, BEE has fallen short of its core objectives and should be replaced with alternative empowerment mechanisms. Government rejects ideological framing. Godongwana pushed back strongly against this position, warning that framing the debate as a choice between transformation and growth risks oversimplifying a complex issue. He argued that meaningful reform can only happen if stakeholders are willing to analyze outcomes objectively rather than approaching the policy from rigid ideological positions. At the moment, the debate is ideological rather than analytical. If we start with an honest assessment of unintended effects, we can have a constructive discussion. Ramaphosa signals review of BBBEE framework. The BEE debate has gained renewed urgency following President Cyril Ramaphosa's recent State of the Nation address, where he reaffirmed the government's commitment to economic transformation. Ramaphosa acknowledged widespread criticism of broad-based black economic empowerment, but rejected claims that the policy is inherently anti-growth or corrupt. Instead, he framed BBBEE as a long-term investment in social stability and inclusive economic development. The president announced that government is undertaking a formal review of the BBBEE framework to refine and strengthen it, ensuring that it delivers broader participation, reduces inequality, and supports sustainable growth. We must see BBBEE not as a cost to the economy, but as an investment in the future of our economy, Ramaphosa said. DA proposes alternative empowerment model. Democratic Alliance leader and Agriculture Minister John Steenhuisen reiterated his party's opposition to what he described as restrictive race-based empowerment policies. Steenhuisen argued that empowerment should be centered on skills development, entrepreneurship, and opportunity rather than ownership structures that he claims benefit a politically connected elite. He promoted the DA's proposed Economic Inclusion for All bill as an alternative approach aimed at addressing poverty and unemployment across all communities. According to Steenhuisen, the DA will continue to campaign for what it calls a more inclusive and growth-oriented empowerment framework. A debate with high economic stakes. The renewed confrontation over BEE highlights deep ideological divisions over how South Africa should pursue transformation while reviving economic growth. With unemployment remaining above 30% and investor confidence fragile, the outcome of this debate could shape fiscal policy, labor markets, and business regulation in the years ahead. While government insists that transformation remains non-negotiable, it has signaled openness to reforming how empowerment policies are implemented. As the review of BBBEE framework progresses, the key question will be whether consensus can be found between constitutional obligations, economic realities, and the demand for broader inclusion. For South Africans, the stakes are high. The future design of empowerment policy will influence who participates in the economy, how growth is achieved, and whether inequality can finally be reduced.